on this episode of Indiana Education Insight.
Indiana has some great OEMs or larger employers, but we have 7,000 manufacturing companies in Indiana. The vast majority of the people that work in manufacturing and the vast majority of those companies are in the supply chain, so they're suppliers. And those are wonderful jobs. They pay very, very high wages.
Yes.
Machining, welding, all different kinds of wonderful places to work.
Every week, the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents is taking you inside today's Indiana education collaboration and tomorrow's education trends. We're staying on the pulse of public school innovators throughout Indiana and beyond. Join our conversation and contribute to our upcoming topics at iapssin.org/podcast. Here's your host, Dr. J.T. Coopman.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Indiana Education Insight. I'm Dr. J.T. Coopman, the Executive Director of the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents. This podcast is being delivered by our IPSS team and produced by our friends at Edge Media Studios. As Executive Director of IPSS, I'm excited to bring you this weekly show where we feature Indiana education innovators from all over our great state, from students to superintendents. We'll also be talking to higher education leaders and educators at the state level as we work together as proactive public education advocates. That's why IPSS is here and why we're proud to bring you this show. Every week, we're talking about trending topics in the public education space while bringing in Indiana education innovators to hear their perspective. As with any organization, it takes great leadership to be successful, and that is one of the main missions of IPSS. Developing great school district leaders. It is always great to have experienced and passionate educators joining the show, so let's get started with today's conversation.
Topics and trends in Indiana education.
Today's guest is Mrs. Stephanie Wells, Vice President of Workforce Development and Policy Administration for the Indiana Manufacturers Association, and Sascha Harrel, Director of Education and Workforce at Purdue University. Mrs. Wells has had numerous public speaking engagements, and she's been instrumental in shaping the conversation about Indiana public schools and has the ability to look at education from various lenses, which is very important. Of course, she's been instrumental and an asset to public education in Indiana. Let's find out how she views the issues in Indiana public schools. Welcome, Mrs. Wells. We are thrilled to have you. Sascha, likewise, we're going to have a great show today with the input from both of you. So if you could, Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and the various roles that you have with the Indiana Manufacturers Association. And then, Sascha, if we could do the same with you as well to follow up.
Oh, sure. Thanks, JT. I am the Vice President of Workforce Development Policy at the Indiana Manufacturers Association, and I have great pleasure in working for such a great organization. We've been around since 1901, represent the state's largest industry, manufacturing, and we're putting together a policy that provides, I think, opportunities for social and economic advancement for people that enter into our industry. Prior to working at the IMA, I worked for the state legislature for a number of years. I also worked for the Daniels administration for close to a decade in their housing agency and their Indiana Economic Development Corporation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mrs. Harrel, how about you?
Sure. Yes. So I am with Purdue University. I'm actually with an organization called INMAC. It's short, but has a long name if you break it down. But it's Indiana Next Generation Manufacturing Competitiveness Center. And so we've been in place for 5 years. I recently came on board as director about 6 months ago in regards to workforce and education. We have a primary focus in providing lift either with partnerships within Purdue faculty, Ivy Tech faculty, or with Vincennes University faculty, and helping manufacturers in regards to either supporting policy or legislative change. So just a lot of room for opportunity and partnerships.
Well, I'm so pleased to have both of you here. This is such an important topic that we have in our state about how we're going to connect workforce with the students in our schools and how we're going to get them brought up to speed, so to speak, about so they can become productive citizens and great employees. So,
For sure.
How important is manufacturing in Indiana and the economy, and what opportunities do you see right now for transforming educational opportunities for all of our students?
Right. So I think I've already mentioned the largest industry in the state of Indiana is manufacturing. We're about 30% of the economy, $102 billion of gross domestic product last year. We are the largest employer, about 538,000 or so individuals are employed in production activities.
Okay.
So that doesn't count in manufacturing, all the folks doing HR and support services and legal and compliance and all of those things. Those are just folks in the production facilities and the plants.
Yep.
So that's about 20% of the workforce, give or take. And we pay the highest wage of all other industries. We have the greatest benefits. We do have a lot of challenges. We are growing. Industry is growing. Production is growing. Productivity is growing. But our skills gap or our gap in workforce continues to grow. And so what I would say our biggest, a couple of things that we're very concerned at the IMA about is awareness around what manufacturing is.
Sure.
So that we have, we do have a perception issue with many people. And that's so... This is a great time to address that because we are tech. Indiana manufacturers are exceptionally advanced. We're hiring more tech occupations than the tech industry itself is. We're seeing huge leaps and bounds with technology every single day and week. So we're entering into, and I think you're probably better to speak to Industry 4.0, but we're at the cusp of a real big change in the way manufacturing operates here in the state and nationwide. So I think we need to, make sure everyone's aware of that, make sure that everyone's aware of the upward mobility within manufacturing and align our education system and our curriculum so that those opportunities are made available to these kids sooner rather than later.
I think that's awesome. I know Purdue's always been a big player in the manufacturing arena. So what's Purdue's role with all of this?
Right. So again, on behalf of NMAC, in regards to, again, we wear 3 hats per the state. We are state funded. So with Vincennes, Ivy Tech, as well as Purdue University, when you look at the career and technical education pathways and we look at students that are coming out of those pathways, we play a big role in providing youth exposure and awareness. And so one of those examples, especially in regards to talking to the technical abilities of students, the perception of manufacturing is still, from the surveys and the data that we have accumulated, shows that it still seems to be dark, dirty, and dingy, and not automated and with 3D, additive printing and data visualization. And so what, one, example I can provide is we're getting ready to announce this week that NMAC and Purdue University has funded a laboratory within Subaru Indiana Automotive at the Lafayette-based facility where they have over 6,000 visitors that come through. Out of that 6,000, 3,000 are youth through the K through 12 system. And so with that, we identified with Purdue faculty in writing curriculum, working with CTE educators, and looking at how we can partner with them to be, more STEM focused, and also then how to show students that there's more than just a press or an automated system that you have to stay online. And so again, as Stephanie has stated, building that exposure and awareness. So through virtual reality, through what they call dobots or robotic arms, coding plays a huge factor now. It's just not the PML machining. The entry-level position is no longer an entry-level position. Very similar to what a bachelor was, 20 years ago to what a master's is equivalent to now.
I would like to interject, and because I don't think that you mentioned this, Sasha and Lisa and the good folks at NMAC all have industry experience. So, without naming names, you've been at several manufacturers and worked there in a variety of roles, as has Lisa Deck, who is also a member of the team. So, a real level of expertise from a ground level, which is nice.
Yeah.
As we go out and talk to industry leaders, sometimes, as in education, you have people or even industry coming in and you're like, well, when did you teach a classroom? Do you understand that the requirements that are there and why this seems like a really great thing to do. At the same time, we have some initiatives that we have to hit, some scope of work we have to hit, some curriculum base that we have to get through, and why this seems like a nicety. And I understand what you want, help me figure out how to do it. And again, that's where, funding comes into play, support, or having industry partners going into the classroom versus the classroom coming to you. And that requires a true relationship, because just going in one time isn't going to work. I always talk about brand marketing. It takes 7 points of, Eddie Bauer to hit your inbox before you finally decide to look at that fleece pullover and maybe purchase it. And
I would purchase it.
I
yes.
would too. But it takes about 7 points before I'm finally like, I think I'll take a look. And the relationship is no different. And we learned that, which Stephanie knows, through the CTE Works Councils that came about when educators industry finally sat at the table across the state and said, what is going on? And it was a wealth of information from both sides. And we still have room to grow there.
Yeah, we don't always speak the same language, right?
No.
Right.
A couple of things come to mind, and I'm just going to interject also that I believe there was either 60 or 160 Rolls-Royce employees that were in Wayne Township schools last week doing some of the interfacing with the students and
That's awesome.
talking with them about manufacturing at Rolls-Royce and what those jobs could mean for these students. So I think manufacturers are doing a lot of that outreach, not only just in the Indianapolis area, but in the Fort Wayne area.
Absolutely.
Down in the New Albany area, Lafayette for sure. So
Yeah, I won't complain. There's a lot of engagement taking place. There needs to be more.
Right.
Needs to be more often. We're starting a little bit behind. Like I said, the perception and awareness issue is so critical that we need more and more of that all the time throughout the school year and the summer and after school as well.
And there were several STEM summer camps this year, and I think you're going to see an expansion of those STEM camps, not just summer camps, but camps overall for students to attend to have this exposure about what they could be doing in manufacturing.
Absolutely. And, if any of your members or any of the fine folks that are watching this podcast would like to partner with any manufacturers or industry partners, Sascha and I are both great resources, and we'd be happy to help connect them.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and with that, we have funding that's available currently. We have the NMAC manufacturing micro grants that are available between now and April of 2019 for things of that nature. Anything that provides youth and exposure to manufacturing. Those can be camps, those can be tours, they can be expos. You can get up to $2,000. And, we benchmarked that off of Region 4 in the Lafayette, Kokomo area. They were, getting around 3,000 students per county between Kokomo and Lafayette, 6,000 students to come through just in a week-long activity based off the Ivy Tech campuses. And that's another great partnership across the state with Ivy Tech and Vincennes, that if you can partner with, your local education system, to show the pathway and where that can lead to, you have a multiplier effect there versus, good efforts, but they remain siloed.
Sure. Yeah. So speaking about those things, what is the future for manufacturing careers in the state of Indiana?
Well, they're going to grow, but like I said, they will be different. I can't look into my magic crystal ball or my magic 8-ball and tell you exactly what they're going to look like. I think we have people on the plant floor who, when they started in manufacturing 30 or 40 years ago, had no idea that they'd be programming robots every day. But, like Sascha said, additive printing, robotic blacksmithing, all different kinds of technologies, data visualization, digitalization. We're at the cusp of the technology is moving so quickly.
Right.
So I think the sky's the limit, with a few caveats. It will be lifelong and continuous learning and upgrading as the technology changes. And so you will likely, if you are a production associate in manufacturing, not be doing the same thing 10 years from now that you're doing today. Sure. And that's good.
Yeah.
Continuous improvement, I would say.
Right, and that goes into the current initiative of upskilling workers that you currently have. People now live to be 100, and that's the average is 80, and so people are working 30 plus years longer than they had in previous generations.
Yep.
And so when we look at Workforce 2030 that has just come into their first grade year this year, it seems way off, but in reality it's 11 years away. And to Stephanie's point, the technology and the adaptations there will change immensely. And so not only does the workforce have to respond and be proactive versus reactive, which is where we've found ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, we keep finding ourselves in this position, even though we're talking about Industry 4.0 and, the fourth revolution, which is the digital revolution. Even with suppliers, when you look at the suppliers across the state of Indiana, which is huge. And without them, we can't get our final product out the door at the OEMs. But they're behind in regards to the
Can you
digital
explain the
manufacturing.
difference between an OEM and a supplier?
Absolutely. So an OEM, for example, would be a Toyota or a Subaru Indiana Automotive or a Caterpillar where they have the finished product. The supplier is the one that would be making your bumper or your windshield or your little faucets that keep your bumper in place. I know this because I just hit a deer last week on the way to work. It's deer season. And I learned all about all the facets and so forth, even though I'd worked at a automotive facility prior.
Yeah.
And I realized really quickly. But if you, even if you listen to, Toyota or another Indiana automotive, Chrysler, if they're behind on a schedule of a new vehicle, it's due to the suppliers because they don't have enough resources, which we're talking about right now, which are the students that Workforce 2030, and we can't, there's just not enough people, and then on top of that, we don't have the skilling that's needed to bring them in. With the current unemployment rate, being less than 3%, we really talk about that workforce. They're underemployed. They've not ever worked in manufacturing,
Sure.
And so we have to build a whole new set of expectations.
Right.
Employability skills is a huge conversation. That's one. If you look at the governor's certificate for youth in regards to building those skill sets, some schools participated, some didn't. But like a lot of things, it doesn't fit for everybody. We have a lot of good educators that are doing good work to help with those skill sets, but we still have a lot to go with. But so those suppliers are the ones that are giving those pieces to make that car that happens in less than 2.3 seconds.
Yeah, and I will say Indiana has some great OEMs or larger employers, but we have 7,000 manufacturing companies in Indiana. The vast majority of the people that work in manufacturing and the vast majority of those companies are in the supply chain, so they're suppliers. And those are wonderful jobs. They pay very, very high wages.
Yes.
Machining, welding, all different kinds of wonderful places to work. And so we don't ever want to forget about those suppliers. It is a little bit harder, frankly, for a small or medium-sized supplier manufacturer to engage with their education partners.
They just don't have the resources.
They don't have the bandwidth.
Yep.
And that's why I say we want everyone to become more involved with their education partners. And so I would say from the education partner perspective, when you approach these folks, and we hope that you do, keep in mind that they don't have a lot of time. And they're usually they're pretty short-staffed. They probably have a lot of positions that they haven't been able to fill. And so, like you said back with the Eddie Bauer thing, make small asks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Asking a small employer to collaborate and sit down and attend meetings, they might not have time to do that. Giving them a more specific ask. Can you host a field trip? Can you take part in a parent awareness activity? Can you help with the summer camp? Can you come in and speak to our class? Those might be things that they can do initially, and then you can continue to collaborate with them more as that partnership builds.
You were talking earlier about how fast things are changing, especially in the digital world, and in what is it, 50% of the jobs that exist today won't exist in 10 years, and so kids are going to be ramping up for new jobs and new things in the future, and that's a pretty short turnaround.
It is.
And are there things that, in your opinion, that schools should be doing to address some of those issues?
Well, I think general STEM awareness is always a really good start. Specifically, engineering concepts, electricity, fluid power. There are a number of things from a production or a technician standpoint that I think conceptually a lot of these kids, if they want to go into this field, need to know about.
Sure.
You don't need to know how to operate every single machine because it's going to be different at every company, and it will be different in 5 years. But there are a lot of those types of things, explaining to kids how manufacturing is technology. And as we all know, tech continues to evolve. And so just kind of laying the groundwork for how that will evolve for them would be really helpful. And also, employability, communications, teamwork, collaboration, you typical, I don't like the term, but soft skills is always good. Yeah.
Sasha, you were going to make a comment about that?
No, I think I was just looking at Stephanie, there's just, like you said, a lot of opportunity there and making those small asks, especially, if you're not an OEM, which with the 7,000 that are there, those are the relationships that need to be built. Without that, the students are just not aware. And again, that goes back to when we first started this conversation today is just that involvement. And no matter how small it is, you just have to continue the involvement. And it's not a one-time event. You have to keep going back and you have to build rapport. And, I always try to challenge industry leaders to sit down with their educators and really find the people within education that are passionate about the pathways or passionate about robotics or passionate about PLM training, and there's those people out there, and it takes a small village, and you find those people, and then they help you, in the process. Because I think, even up to 5 years ago, a lot of people, especially with industry, were just trying to do it themselves. And where it just doesn't work, and it's not resourceful. If you look at a supply chain model and you really look at how people were previously going at it, we weren't getting the output that we needed or the product that we wanted. And so having to go back and really look at that process design, if you will, from a supply chain perspective, and everybody was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. We're not getting what we need. And so again, we continue to have this conversation, but hopefully we're being more proactive now than we were.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we felt like this program would be a good program, is that Stephanie has been very good to reach out to the Superintendents Association, because she realizes the importance of that communication and that partnering and work together. So that's one of the reasons that we're doing this today is more of that outreach and more of that partnering and more of that communication.
It's critical. And I suspect that in some communities, not all, but in some communities, we have wonderful, wonderful manufacturing employers. And if you don't work there or you don't have family that works there, you're not even sure that they are there. And I think there's just a wealth of untapped potential. And we know that, our superintendent partners are just critical to moving forward with this. And honestly, it's been a really warm response thus far. So we're, of course, we've just scratched the surface. So we hope to continue to be a resource and to help, facilitate those relationships.
Well, that Educator Manufacturers Day that we did recently at Indianapolis Ivy Tech was a huge success.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We thought it was.
Yeah.
But we just scratched the surface. And we'll have more of those events, but getting everyone in a room so that they can meet each other and so that they can learn best practices. The truth of the matter is, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are 5 or 6 or 7 really great programs like camps, or the Lafayette Manufacturing Week, or there's different curriculum. There's no need to recreate that. Just steal from what somebody else has already done. And so just an opportunity to get everybody in a room and learn about those best practices, and then just steal them.
Is that what is referred to as the Manufacturers Day? Is there something else beyond Manufacturers Day?
Well, so technically, Manufacturing Day is the first Friday of every October. So it's October 5th this year.
Okay.
This is a nationwide initiative. It's run primarily by the National Association of Manufacturers, but the Indiana Manufacturers Association is an endorsing sponsor and partner. But what we like to say is, any day can be manufacturing day. So we certainly don't want to limit ourselves to one day or 1 week or 1 month of the year. We're happy to have, some emphasis put on these types of activities, but best case, we do this all year round. We do it in the wintertime. We do it during school breaks. We do it as school calendars allow so that we can have these awareness opportunities. So it should never just be on October 5th, ever.
And there's and there's so many other organizations that if you take FIRST Robotics across the state of Indiana, it is huge. And then you take, a lot of those kids from FIRST Robotics will go to Purdue, and then they're in Purdue First, or Indiana First, or Ball State First, where they're also mentoring then, and they're coming back. And so there's a lot of resources that are already out there, as Stephanie said, to not recreate the wheel. Tap into the resources that are already there. You have JAG, that is a great program to look at potential, entry-level, possible positions, or getting, kids interested in manufacturing. So there's a lot of, great partnerships that are already there. You just have to put your hand out and say, hey, how do we partner, and what does that look like for us? It's not the same for everybody. And to Stephanie's point about benchmarking other organizations and what they're doing, that's something we have to do a better job at.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great initiatives that are taking place, but as they talk about reaching across the aisle or reaching across even county within region, just getting them to sit at the table, a couple years ago, just sitting down with Kokomo and Howard County and Tippecanoe County and talking about best practices. We learned a lot from one another and realized there was a lot of things that were happening that we could, leverage from one another. It doesn't have to look the same, but at least gives you the turnkey to go in and have that impact.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and some areas have even done really good awareness activities much, much younger than I think what we've been concentrating on. Young elementary school kids, interfacing with manufacturing either through a plant tour in some cases, or, there's a great Make Space initiative going on at Conner Prairie.
Yep.
There's all different kinds of opportunities for the younger kids, which I think starting that conversation with them earlier about how technologically advanced this is and with their parents is critical.
So that whole awareness piece, this is part of the awareness piece.
for sure.
It's just creating the awareness. What other things can we as educators and superintendents do to help you with that awareness piece?
Well, I would say to start is invite yourself to a plant and to, and to reach out and make an introduction. We are a very big proponent of externship programs so that teachers and educators and counselors can learn about exactly what it is that we're doing. It's pretty cool.
Would that be like a work experience actually in the manufacturing?
That would be,
Yes.
Yeah. So we're definitely looking to advance more opportunities for that in a variety of different ways. But we think that would be, that's a really impactful learning tool. So during breaks, particularly during the summer, if there's an educator who wants to get paid and learn about more about the industry, that's a great opportunity to do so.
And of course, work-based learning is one of the catchphrases that is being discussed today.
Right.
So how do we create these work-based experiences and internships for kids when they're in high school? And are there limitations for that?
So there are limitations, especially in manufacturing. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. If somebody wants to talk to me about it, I can bore you to tears. But there are limitations, but there are solutions. It will take a little bit of extra work and planning with your employer partners to make sure that the kids fit the definition of either an apprenticeship or a student learner, and make sure that you have all your ducks in a row as you will.
Sure.
And these are typically going to be in not in your standard assembly type internships or co-ops or whatever, but it will be in more of your machining. For example,
and we've had this, and you've prepared a really nice document about age limitations. 16 and 17-year-old kids can do certain things, and 18-year-old kid and above can do certain things. Yeah,
18-year-olds can do generally just about anything, that a non-student can do. 16 and 17-year-olds, there are some limitations. And I think probably the biggest, there are two really big barriers. You can overcome them, but one is insurance.
Right.
And two is making sure that there is an appropriately trained adult supervisor,
right,
who understands the machines and the equipment themselves.
Sure. Yep.
And so, it might take a minute to build these. I think, expecting a work-based learning program in your area to be turnkey is probably not terribly realistic.
Right.
Because you want it to be done well,
Yep.
and you're going to need to market it. And I think working with the parents and the kids and getting them prepared for that is going to take a minute as well.
Right.
We don't think at the IMA, our members believe that the best way to teach employability skills is to give someone an employment opportunity.
Right. Yep.
And this is also it's a job interview on the student's part for us after going through a really robust work-based learning program. If manufacturing's for you, then the sky's the limit. And even if it's not your ball of wax, then you'll know.
Sure.
And you can try something else.
Right. Yep. Sascha, you want to jump in on any of that?
I think I was just going to lead off on what she just finished with is that if you determine manufacturing is not for you and you have that experience and you make that determination, what's great about that is that you know then versus trying to come back in later, which is what we find a lot of times is we have people who, come out of high school. If you look statistically at the numbers at the, I'm trying to think of a good term, but they don't go into post-secondary schooling.
Right.
And as you go through high school, your senior year, what are you going to do? They're like, oh, I'm going to college. I'm going to college. I'm going to college. And then when we look at the numbers of what that really looks like of who actually went to college, it's less than 30% that actually then end up going to a 4-year or 2-year program. And if they would have had that manufacturing experience prior, they would have had a much more defined experience, right? And then a lot of times we get people coming in that in their mid-20s and they have, accumulated debt from, either
Right.
trying and then, deciding it's not for them. And so they accumulate this debt, they come to work for us, and they find that it is, in some respects, you have to be at work before, the clock starts, if you're doing production and some things of that nature. And then they learn later that it's maybe not a career choice for them. And then again, they're starting back over and it adds on a couple more years and so forth. So, with anything, if my parents, took me to the ballet when I was younger and I realized real quick I did not want to be a ballerina. But without that experience, I still would have probably thought maybe there was a chance, but or wanting to be a zookeeper, and then I see it and think, it's probably not what I want to do either, but you don't get that unless you have the experience or the exposure. And so again, that's really the value of that.
Yeah. And so I would also say with with all of the best work-based learning programs that exist anywhere, but especially here, is there multiple on and off ramps, right? So, there are some kids who legitimately are like, this is not for me.
Sure.
But some kids are like, I'm okay going into production right after I complete high school and I complete this program.
Right.
And they do that. Now, they might take it back up later and get more skills, and that's at their at their pace. There are other kids who say, I really want to become I want to get educated to the technician level, and they might keep going through their Ivy Tech or Vincennes with the cooperation of the employer. Many of these employers sponsor students to go get those technical degrees or certificates.
Right.
And then some of the kids, frankly, quite a few of the kids will say, I love manufacturing. I do not want to be a technician. I'm going to go and become an engineer, or I'm going to go get my business degree, but I want to come back and work here. We want them all.
Right.
So
Yes, we need them all with our 2 million that is not that
we
are
need
gap.
We do need them all. And so I would even say just that awareness around manufacturing, just bringing them back
Right.
to that business.
Yep.
Yeah.
If they don't want to be an industrial maintenance technician,
That's okay.
that's totally fine.
Right. Yeah.
There's lots of opportunities.
I'm going to kind of bring something up that I'm pretty confident that you're aware about in Columbus, Indiana, with working Bartholomew County Schools, with Cummins, with Ivy Tech, and with Honda on that campus next to the airport there. Great model that they've developed, in my opinion, for how kids are getting that exposure and the opportunities to work in manufacturing and either see it and dig deeper, or to see it and go, no, I want to go in another direction.
It's awesome.
So we do have some good models here in the state of Indiana, and that happens to be one that I'm aware of that is working very well. Tippecanoe County has some great models that you have going. Are there other examples that you can cite?
So that's a very scaled up version down in Columbus, and so that's really good. I think what Fiat Chrysler and Red Gold and some other employers have done with Ivy Tech up in the Kokomo-Tipton area
Right.
is also really good, in that it's been very scalable and very successful. Lots of numbers of kids, a lot of on and off ramps. I would say there are some other things that are going on, probably not quite that large yet. There's some great work down in Madison. There's great stuff going on up in Cass. There's stuff, here in town, in Indianapolis, rather, all over. But, we need to have more of those scalable programs so that it's easier for, like I said earlier, for those suppliers to be able to plug into. It's very hard for a smaller company to start a work-based learning program. If you have a large program that's started by a number of large employers in an area, like in Columbus, like in Lafayette, like in Indianapolis, it's much easier to plug them in.
Sure.
And that, I think, provides the most utility for everybody. So we need to see more of that. There's a number of great programs, but those are some of the probably the most highly performing
Well, you mentioned
right now.
Scalability, so
It's critical.
You take that as a huge program. It doesn't mean that it can't be replicated on a different scale in a different area.
Absolutely, but I think that we need to make these programs sustainable, and therefore scaling is an issue for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
But there are boutique programs all over that are just lovely.
So all of that takes money. So what are some resources available to build awareness and to build the bridges between the employers and the educators?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, one of those opportunities is with NMAC, with the manufacturing micro grants. That's an opportunity where employers, educators, or industry partners can get up to $2,000 per event. And we find that it's around $3.10 on average per student to cover transportation and a sub for the day. And that was one of the things when talking with superintendents across the state that felt that was something that they needed assistance with. And so again, NMAC's platform is to provide that lift. And so that was, one of the things. There's $150,000 that has been allotted to that initiative. And then, working at state funding as well, even with Next Level Jobs through Governor Holcomb, if you look at from industry leaders that can partner, but that would be more as students graduate and you're skilling them up. If you want to do, upskilling with AIM through Vincennes University, or you want to do the Lebanon facility with Vincennes as well, a lot of people are using that. And then FCA Chrysler also has some initiatives. Also partnering with industry leaders itself, you'll find that either if you take in kind, which Stephanie was talking about earlier, of the talents of the workforce that they have and putting them out into the community, or bringing the students in, and just giving of your time, we find that that's more advantageous for the employer, typically if you're not an OEM, and that's how they like to participate. Manufacturing Day has some opportunities there as well. So those are some resources.
So, as you know, the IMA, we do government advocacy, and I don't think it's any secret that the IMA wishes and will ask for more incentives to build youth work-based learning in the coming session, be it a tax credit, be it an expansion of the Next Level Jobs employer grant so that it can be used in the youth space. I think it's great what the governor has done thus far. But you're going to have to put some money into this to build some infrastructure. We also think that, it will be easier to, build work-based learning programs, as we provide the necessary infrastructure, provide more resources for career counseling and some other things. So we're going to get there. I think it's... we're going to get there.
Yeah, we're going to get there. Some of this is just coming at us so fast.
It is.
And we're just going to have to kind of slow down, take a look at it, and how are we going to make this work for the benefit of the citizens in the state of Indiana and for the children in Indiana public schools.
Yeah, so I think, in the meantime, while there's not incentives, I would just say again, there's no real turnkey solution. These programs, I think, are of benefit. Both for the students and for the local community and for our education partners.
Absolutely.
They are not turnkey. They're going to take a minute. They need to be done well. They need to be done right. And we hope that we can, everybody, both the employers and through state government, can put some more resources towards it.
Absolutely. And as a superintendents association, we certainly want to do what we can to benefit, the governor's workforce plan and whatever we can do to assist.
Right.
You know that we will be here for you and work together with you to get this accomplished.
Thanks, JT.
So in closing, any advice that you would have for Indiana Public School District leaders?
Hang in there. Hang in there. We want to support you and the good work that you do, and we want to help you and your students and your communities be successful. So look at us as a resource.
Well, obviously, this is a very important initiative for our state.
Yes.
And education will be a huge player in getting this accomplished.
Always.
Oh, yes.
So we understand that. And
Yeah.
So just really appreciate everything that you're doing in both cases.
Great.
So I'd like to thank Mrs. Wells and Mrs. Harrel for being with us today and being our guest on the IPSS edition of the Indiana Education Insight. Now it's time to wrap up this episode with my take on the current state of affairs in Indiana.
Dr. JT's closing comments.
It was pointed out that accountability is still important, but there are many factors that go into preparing all students to become lifelong learners and contributors in the 21st century. As such, we need to begin to change the dialogue. We also discussed the teacher shortage and the need to address human capital issues and rebrand the profession of education. As such, we need to change the dialogue. Due to the complex issues associated with school reform, we need to engage our communities and have them help us develop the portrait of a graduate. As such, we need to change the dialogue. Through this dialogue, it is my hope that we can get our legislators and our state leaders to see the value of public schools and the nexus of promoting public schools and economic development in Hoosier communities. As I see these as investments in our children and in our state, not as an expenditure. Perhaps we can pursue this issue and others in another segment. On our next show, October 22nd, we welcome Mr. Tim Toman, President and CEO of Performance Services. Perhaps he can provide some additional insights into the State House and education. Join us for that and more on the next Insight into Indiana Education. Thanks for being part of education. Please stand up for Indiana Public Schools.